Get started. I just want to do the dedication of this particular shiur. So I wanted to wish long life because Russell Manning lost his sister a few days ago. They both passed away at 55. So Joanne Simone, her Hebrew name was Yael Bas Rachel, wanted
Mm.
to wish uh, Rosemary a long life, as well as the Manning family and her respective families in the UK, because the sisters are there. And most of you know Russell Manning. I think you've seen we've done a dedication. He passed away in a vehicle accident at about 55. So just also sister passed away at the same age. All right, we're going to start this year. The first thing I wanted to just ask is, Aidan, did you have a chance to listen to the share last night after gym, or were you tired? If you were, it's not a problem. Just let me.
Sorry, I completely forgot actually.
No, that's okay. That's honest. Um,
I'll try. I'll figure it out. I'll catch you on them.
no, no, no. So as long as you catch up that before at some point, then that's fine. It's up to you. But the reason why I sent you that link is it wasn't the full share. It was a summary of the concepts. And I thought at 20 minutes, it's not the end of the world instead of two or three other shiurim. Okay. So I'm just going to share
Okay.
the screen. Kevin, would you like to um, speak to us first before we start the Mishnah,
Sure.
the Gemara?
Okay, so this week is Parashat Shoftim. Shoftim is if you translate it, it actually means judges. And that's exactly what it discusses. Two issues I'm going to discuss very briefly. First is the appointment of judges and officers. And a Beis Din needs to handle uh, communal matters such as divorce and financial disputes and give a ruling according to halakha. And justice must be fair and equitable, authoritative. The second issue in this week's parsha is the prohibition following of the majority to do evil. It says, okay, and it says, although it's not directly related to, no, not directly in the parsha of Shoftim, majority vote is invalid if it leads to an unjust verdict. So, an example of that is in a rabbinical court. If two judges vote for a guilty verdict, but the third judge has compelling evidence of innocence, the court cannot rely on the majority, and they must reevaluate the case or do a retrial, uh, and make sure that the verdict is based on truth.
Good, good. Just to bring a bit of insight into what Kevin is saying, if you look at Parsha Shoftim, it's actually found, if you look at Deuteronomy, Devarim, it's actually in the 16th chapter. That's where you'll find it. I'm saying this to the shir because we're doing a dedication and not sure if anybody else listening how proficient the Hebrew is. So it's in Deuteronomy chapter 16. It has the whole of Parsha Shoftim. And when Kevin was talking about judges and officers, it's actually in verse number 18. Okay. So I remember because I had to learn these things. And we say, okay, so how is that relevant to us today? Specifically, because although we don't set up judges and officers, why do we have to learn it as individuals? Because the musar of it is that every person must appoint judges and officers within themselves. So the judge represents our inner reasoning, and the officer represents the power to enforce good decisions, the self-discipline. It's not enough to know what's right. You've got to create habits and self-discipline to follow through. So the application on a personal level is to set personal boundaries and routines to ensure that what you know is the right thing to do for your growth and development and what's ethical is followed into action and self-discipline. So I just thought I'd share that. And we're doing a Mishnah in this Gemara, which is appropriate because we're doing an aliyah for the neshama of the soul, and they share the same letters, and therefore the timing is apt. Okay, so let me just share something a second with you guys on the screen. I know Aiden had problems reading it yesterday. His because it wasn't on the screen, and us because we need reading glasses. So, okie dokie. Can everybody see the Mishnah on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, Gavin Stoller, you haven't had a chance to read in a while.
But I've misplaced my glasses. You're gonna have to get someone
No, that's
else.
okay.
I can see the screen, but I can't go that far sometimes.
Exactly what I was telling Aiden. I had a feeling. We're all getting older. Aiden, you're the next generation that's going to inherit the mantle. When we're in Shady Pound's old age home, you'll be giving the shirim to us. Um, okay, Lance, you want to give it a go?
Okay. The previous Mishnahs have detailed the liabilities and exemptions from exile based on the nature of the act which caused the death or the circumstances surrounding it. The following Mishnahs discuss exemptions that relate to the identity of the victim or his killer. A father is exiled as a result of inadvertently killing his son, and a son is exiled if as a result of inadvertently killing his father. All are exiled as a result of inadvertently killing an Israelite. And an Israelite is exiled as a result of inadvertently killing them, with the exception of a resident alien. Okay, interesting. A resident alien is not exiled except as a result of inadvertently killing another resident alien. The Gemara will explain the apparent contradiction between the last two rulings.
Okay, good. So in this year, we're not talking about E.T. the extraterrestrial, any alien life. We are talking about what's considered. There was a song busting called illegal alien. It's basically who's entitled to be a registered legal immigrant within a country, and they have to uphold certain laws. So in a Torah-based environment, they are agreeing to the mitzvah-based laws applicable on women, which are not time-bound mitzvahs, but certainly the other criteria if they want to live amongst the Jewish people, and therefore they awarded certain levels of atonement as well as certain levels of protection, which idolaters are not. Because if you're in a society where nobody keeps the rules, they're not entitled to that protection either. So, I just want to address the first part is that the Gemara wants to look at this first law of the Mishnah, and it says, hang on, but we learned something contradictory in the previous Mishnah. What do you mean in this Mishnah, father's exiled as a result of inadvertently killing his son? Because what we learned in the previous Mishnah is that verse excludes from exile the father who hits his son and inadvertently kills him. So, bottom line is the previous Mishnah's exemption of the father from exile is based on the fact that the father was engaged in the mitzvah of educating and raising his son when he killed him. So, what context for those listening to the share that hadn't attended previously is it was talking about a father hitting his son or a teacher hitting his pupil. Now, any head trauma or anything that result in neurological damage or gross negligence, they are eligible, even if it resulted in an inadvertent killing, but it was meant to be a beating, will result in being sent for a lifetime to the city of refuge until the Kohen Gadol dies. What we are speaking about here is a sort of corporal punishment of caning, for example, on the thigh, where the son might develop a clot or an aneurysm, but it's in no way traumatic, and it's like a 1 in 100,000 chance of it happening. So it's the only reason why it's not considered a complete accident is because it didn't happen, the aneurysm, without some sort of pre-action by the father. But if it was done as an educational tool to give a child or a student self-discipline, we had caning growing up, then under safe purposes, that would be allowed, even if Unfortunately, there was 1 in 100,000 chance that it could go awry. So in that particular case, that is why the teacher or parent is not sent to the city of refuge, because they have an obligation as part of the educational process to apply a corporal punishment for uh, those that would not learn otherwise. The argument between Ravina and Rava is Ravina is turning around and saying, listen, you might need it once, and then from then on the child will learn his lesson. Whereas Rava turns around and says, if you look in Proverbs, it turns around and says, spare the rod and spoil the child. Basically, he's saying that you're going to get the maximum out of your child if it's almost, or your student, if it's unpredictable, because you can't expect for the entire part of high school that one caning will remain fresh in their mind as a level to enhance the maximum result of self-discipline. So that's where they argue. So as far as this is concerned, if a parent went into the forest to chop wood in an activity that wasn't regarded in any educational purpose, and his son happened to follow, but there was some degree of negligence where the axe head fell off the axe handle and killed the son, or a wood chipping flew off the tree and killed the son, the reason why the father would be liable, or the teacher, as would any other person for killing another individual um, accidentally, is because there is a certain degree of negligence. When it's gross negligence, it's determined bordering on the deliberate, and therefore they don't go to the city of exile or the city of refuge to get protection from the victim's relatives, but rather they're susceptible to that sort of open vengeance. Furthermore, they are not entitled to the atonement value that being sentenced to almost prison of the city of exile would achieve for them as a result of it bordering on slightly negligent, but a degree of accidental nature within it. But it's an activity that does have a certain amount of risk. So any activity, whether it be a father or a teacher that isn't education based, doesn't give them the protection under the guise of education of extenuating circumstances to the same degree. Okay, so the Gemara notes this contradiction, and the Gemara answers, look, this speaks of a case where he learns without being forced. In other words, the Mishnah originally wants to say maybe we're holding like Ravina, and Ravina is saying if you crack your child or your pupil once and he's a good boy, you don't need to have what do you call it, sporadic caning. It would be enough that he's on the right sort of path. So the Gemara says, well, maybe this particular Mishnah is going more according to Ravina than Rava. And the Gemara says, Abba Shaul has said that it is a mitzvah within the educational process to occasionally do corporal punishment, and that's not a education enhancer. It's very much part of the educational process. It's not a preparatory measure, and therefore, since it says it by Shaul, and it says it by many cases in Proverbs, we learn that it is appropriate. So, what would you have to say? How would this Mishnah basically work with Rava? We know how it works with Ravina, this current one. So, because the Gemara asks, but you have said that even if the son learns willingly, the father performs a mitzvah by hitting him occasionally, meaning it's not just as a self-discipline behavior, but you're going to get the most out of it. So, how would you answer Ravina? Because this Mishnah would have to also answer Rava. We've answered Ravina, and the Gemara revises its answer, and it says, look, um, there are two types of education. The first type of education has to do with Torah, that it's a mitzvah to ensure that your children and your pupils learn Torah, because it's sustaining to the soul. It is an absolute essential. And then the Gemara says, okay, so what if it's not a Torah-based activity? What if it is an apprenticeship to carpentry, for example? In other words, a father struck and killed his son while teaching him a trade. Now, before I go further, guys, do you know if there is an obligation to teach your son a trade, or is it only Torah-based learning that you think in terms of um, um, what's required here under the guise of protection for inadvertent accidental killing?
Only Torah.
Okay, so you say only learning.
As well, for sure.
Okay, and Gavin, what are you saying?
No, definitely a trade. It's absolutely a requirement.
Yeah.
Mitzvah
Not,
Toraita.
but not. No, the Torah is from the father, but the trade can be from anybody. Who says the father knows a trade that he can teach his son?
Okay, so Lance is bringing a good point, but that's why in Kedushin 30b, and I learned this from the late Jeff Kaplan, is in many, many cases, the reason why it would cover Lance's question, and that is if a teacher was not just what you call a rabbi that taught the pupil Torah, but it was a teacher where it was an apprenticeship and he was teaching the pupil in education because he was being paid by the father. Or if the father happened to be in a trade and the son was learning the apprenticeship from the father, under both learning Torah as well as learning a trade, in Kedushin 30b, it said the appointed person, whether it's the father who doesn't have money and therefore is teaching the trade that he knows to his son, or the father has money and is having the son trained in a trade that the father is not competent in, or he has the money to teach his son a better livelihood than he is doing. Both are covered under that guise within the role of a career enhancement as well as learning Torah lots. You get what I'm saying? So it's a great point. It's a great point. It doesn't have to be the father, but it's under that particular tutelage, whoever is doing it is covered. Okay. So Kedushin 30b, if anybody's stuck in the Haredi world and says you don't have to earn a living, and what it says in Kedushin 30b is it basically says if you don't give your son an education or secular education and equip him in the world to earn a trade or a living, you're actually setting him up to either be a thief, where he's going to steal because he becomes desperate, a liar because he's going to steal by conning people, and therefore breaking certain Torah edicts, as well as you're setting him for a life not only of failure, but of not being able to get the right sort of spouse or look after his children. So it's an imperative, it's not a nice to. And he had a specific thing that he wasn't totally happy with the Haredi way of doing it, this lopsided thing of that the wife must always go out and support the husband while he's in yeshiva or a bocha in kollel with his mates. So since he has the means to support himself, how could the person be responsible? Because if it's apprenticeship based, the reason being is the Gemara says where that responsibility falls away is if this is a second career option that the teacher or the parent is teaching this apprentice, this young teenager or this person in the early 20s, meaning it's not then a necessity, it's a luxury to have a second trade. And therefore, under the second trade, they don't have the same amount of protection to use almost a corporal punishment as a means to make sure that person adheres to it. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. I'm not going to argue. I think today's world is probably more sophisticated, that you would need to give your child as many possible opportunities of career enhancement, but then nobody is going to beat it into the student. At the end of the day, they're going to be so busy with university student loans that if they don't start earning a living, they're going to hang themselves. Okay. And on that cheerful note, it turns around and says that if the son already knows another trade or the pupil, it suffices for his livelihood, and the teacher, being the father or the teacher himself, is not under that protection for adding the element of corporal punishment as discipline. So that now we understand the contradiction between why a father is exiled as a result of inadvertently killing his son here, where he is exiled and where previously he was not exiled. Okay. Kevin, you want to give it over before we go to the next concept?
Let's ask someone else. I was like, damn, I was
Okay,
doing things, I was listening, but I
I'm
wasn't.
not picking on anybody. I watch everybody like a hawk. This is not a
And
criticism.
then you pick on them. Yes.
But
You
no,
said the last
I
point is
don't
not
cane them
subject
for
to
teaching them
exile.
Torah. And there's no caning, there's
So
no corporal
Damon,
punishment.
okay, can I just ask a question relating to
Sure,
it, even if I don't give it over?
sure.
The intentions of the father or the teacher were to teach the son or the child of the mentee a trade for their future and to discipline them if they stepped out of line. So I think that the argument is, are they absolved from this? And because they go to exile as a punishment, but the intentions were good. It wasn't deliberate. It unfortunately happened.
So that's a good question, and that means, Kevin, you actually do know what's going on. You're just a little tired to give it over. So that's exactly the bottom line, is that this Mishnah is not a contradiction to the other Mishnah, because the previous Mishnah said is when you're teaching your son Torah or a trade, or whether it's a rabbi teaching your son Torah or a tradesman having his apprenticeship with your son, all of them under those auspices of education, according to Rava, are entitled to add corporal punishment as a means to get the best response out of the pupil, out of the child. Um, and Ravina turns around and says, well, if you have somebody that pays attention and is good, what do you need this as a continual tool for? Once should suffice. And Rav is turning around and says, with you got to look at the long-term perspective. It's not as if they're with you for a week. They're with you for maybe a few years, and therefore, while it can't be out of line, it's certainly going to get far more out of them than if there's no discipline whatsoever. And therefore, the Gemara says, why in our Mishnah do we say that all of a sudden the parent is responsible if there's an inadvertent killing to the degree that his life's turned upside down and he's exiled? It's because the father in this case took on to take the son maybe to a forest or do an activity with the son that wasn't educational based, and therefore it would be like any other inadvertent killing through a slight amount of negligence where there's no protection under the laws of education as a mitzvah, because we said that anything that was obligatory and not voluntary gave you a certain amount of protection within your role. So if you had to do a mitzvah at which there was a degree of negligence, a slight degree, in other words, a little bit of risk, but no gross negligence, then it does give you a certain amount of protection. And therefore, educating your son is a non-voluntary obligatory activity, whether or not it's to teach him a trade or to teach him Torah. And only in that role are you exempted from going to exile, and you are not held as responsible for the inadvertent killing. But within that role, it gives you a certain amount of protection because it's a mitzvah and an obligation. And yeah, that's about the sum of it. So as far as another trade is concerned, it says that is not obligatory. I'll come to you now, Lance. Just hang on, I'm just getting a more stable internet connection. It's not obligatory a second trade. It's a nice too, but all of a sudden when you're going above and beyond the call of duty, then it doesn't give you the same amount of protection. And I think the more you teach your child, the better. Lance, what was your question?
You've spoken, so which Rava was it that says that spit rather than spoil a child? So that isn't really the Jewish approach, because it's mentioned the best example is actually with David HaMelech. So it says that he used to discipline he didn't discipline his other sons, and Avshalom, they tried to like dispose him as king. They tried to steal the kingship. He had huge problems with his children because he didn't discipline them, and it specifically says that it's only with Shlomo that he disciplined him properly, and then he was it worked out much better, that relationship.
Okay, so then according to that commentary, that would go with our Mishnah, both this one and the previous, because everything is context related. And Abba Shaul would agree with that opinion with regards to David HaMelech, and so would Rava. As far as Ravina is concerned, it's not that he disagrees, Lance, it's that he said the context appropriateness is depending on the behavior of the children or the student. And if you can see they're going off course, okay, then it has to be appropriate, but it has to be as a responser to what you're getting out of that child's potential and adherence to what they need to do. Whereas Rava and Abba Shaul said, well, you can't trust that you're necessarily getting the most out of them. And occasionally, that not knowing um, um, how it's going to turn out, you have to make sure that it's almost emblazoned in their memory, but not 5 years ago they got caned once, but that every time they kind of go out of line, you got to reapply it. So they're not at completely dissimilar positions. Just Ravina said it's more, you have to look at the behavior as a litmus test, and Rava says you get the self-discipline right and you're going to get the most out of your child, and he's quoting Proverbs. Does that make sense? So it's not a contradiction at all. Any questions, Lance? If you're not happy, tell me.
No, that's fine. So within context, you the one saying it's almost systematic, the the punishment. Otherwise, only as required.
Correct. Correct. Because Ravina,
they're both agreeing in principled punishment, but one's only like minimum, and the one's well, whenever.
no, exactly. The one is a systematic educational system approach, and the other one is a analysis based on what you're getting out of the student. But this is why. And Aidan, this is the one thing that you might have missed, is that that share that you missed, as well as last night, was saying, according to Ravina, it's non-obligatory, the corporal punishment or the discipline aspect. What's obligatory is the educational process. It's non-obligatory. And therefore, since it's non-obligatory, if any damage occurs where there's an inadvertent killing, you're held just as responsible as whether or not you were in a forest chopping wood and that wood came off to kill somebody. Because it's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to educate. It's not the discipline factor. It is preparatory to the mitzvah of educating. Whereas Rava says it is part of the mitzvah itself. It's not preparatory. It is exactly part of the educational structure. Meaning, if a dog defecates on your carpet and you hit it with a newspaper, even a stupid dog would know it's not great. And therefore he's saying it's not preparatory to the education, it's the very education itself of discipline. Do you see, Aidan, the difference in terms of their view? So therefore, Ravina is holding that father or that teacher fully responsible because it's not a mitzvah, the discipline aspect. It's an enhancer. Whereas Rava's saying it's part of the mitzvah, and therefore you get a certain cause of protection that you don't go to exile for it. Do you see the difference? Any questions from your side because you weren't there for a while? Okay. All right.
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, listen, I've kept
Thank
it simple. I've taken a lot of commentary out to drive you mad. And I just wanted to give you guys the bottom line in this year. We're done. I know Kevin had to go at 6:10. Tomorrow we're going to hit a complicated issue from Sanhedrin about Rav Shimon and the rabbinical opinion of what happens if you've got almost assault with a parent that might turn into a eventual death. So it's going to get complicated. But this one we just went easy peasy. All right, guys. I hope it wasn't
Thanks, sir.
really simple, but I thought nobody needs complicated. All right.
Yeah,
All right. And
Yeah,
Kevin,
thanks.
sorry for putting you on the spot. If it's any consolation,
No.
nobody got
No.
caned. Nobody got caned with
Yeah,
my
exactly.
complication. But the thing of
Exactly.
That's why I like the online.
because that's why Lance likes it online. Lance knows me exactly.
Yes.
But Kevin, it's not just you. I can see when somebody's exhausted, and I ask you not to test you or catch you out, but it's
I've got
just
a good excuse, Damon. I arrived back at 4:15 this morning,
yeah,
so
no. It's not to
and
catch
I
you
didn't
out.
doze
It's
off
when
once, eh?
somebody has that glazed look and they're not following, they're not going to follow the next year. So it's just to say, are you coping? Are you understanding? It's not to try and embarrass or
Yeah.
it's just like everybody phases out. I fell asleep at
I
the
had a
shed
glazed
looking
look
at
this morning when I
Kanari.
was looking at the glass, Damon. Then I had a glazed look.
Exactly. You must have been in a church. All
I
right.
must
Be
start
well.
wearing my sunglasses to the lecture.
Cheers, guys.